What is up, Knicks fans? Welcome back to yet another episode of Fireside Knicks with your hosts, Dylan and Davin. And today we're going to talk about Karl Anthony Towns because he was really quiet in the game against Cleveland. He only took 8 shots. He's really been largely uninvolved in the offense for the early part of the season. He's getting into double figures in points, but we feel like we're missing quite a lot from him. We feel like we could be seeing a lot more. And I know it's early. I know he's still trying to figure out his role with the team, but I think he's largely been kind of a disappearing act so far, and we want to see more out of him. So we're just going to talk about that. So Davin, first off, tell me how you're doing. And secondly, what do you think we're missing from Karl Anthony Towns? Because I think we're missing quite a lot right now, or in the early part of the year.
Doing great, man. Thank you for asking. And to be quite honest, I think the whole entire Knicks team, there's kind of a gear that's missing right now. Yeah, 3 games into the season, it's early still, so we're not going to get too overwhelmed or too over analytical with anything. At the same time, though, we do understand that you're setting this tone right now. You're kind of setting the stage what's going to become muscle memory for the team. And everyone needs to be involved. I'm not going to jump on anyone too crazy right now, but Jalen Brunson, shot selection has been questionable at best. 5 for 15 last night through 3 quarters, and then proceeded to go 3 for 9 in the fourth quarter. While Karl Anthony Towns only had 8 shots the whole game, and Mikal Bridges, who went 9 for 14 through 3 quarters, proceeded to have 1 shot in the whole entire quarter. So I understand. We know who the captain is. There's no question about that. The whole entire thing is about getting everyone else involved, getting guys involved the best that you can. And that's the thing also, expecting Brunson to be the sole playmaker and doing something he's not best at is a stretch, per se, because there's going to be times where he's going to become second-guessing himself. He'll become in times where he'll be, not making the best plays on the floor. And that's just because simply everything's on him right now. And that's never been what he's best at. That's never been his skill. Shout out Julius Randle. He's doing great where he's at. At the same time, having a second playmaker and initiator in the half court is what it's all about. Someone that can be an imposing figure in the half court settings compared to waiting on someone else to get a play going for them. They're going to just go down and get it themselves. And that's one thing that's kind of missing just a bit. And it's just very interesting to see how things are spilling out here in just 3 games. 3 games. So I said, I'm not going to get too crazy. Score first guard. We know this is his team. Nothing changes that. But other people have to get involved in the offense. And the way to do that for Towns, in my opinion, he made more threes. He had a higher 3-point rate when Rudy Gobert's on the floor with him last season. So sharing the floor with another big, per se, having him on the floor with Hukporti. We saw Hukporti have 11 minutes last night. Having those two on the floor together at the same time, that opens up some lanes and also gets us open shots for off-ball screen set for Karl Anthony Towns. So little things like that can really do it. But a lot of playmaking is on the hands of Jalen Brunson right now. And that's really what they have to learn to balance. I'm not going to blame coaching. I'm not going to blame Brunson too much. He does great taking accountability. But it's just really factoring that in and allowing it to, for the whole entire rotation to feed off of Brunson.
And, one of the things that I thought was a little eye-opening was that Hukporti was getting closing minutes last night. I mean, obviously he didn't finish the game, but he was still out on the floor with less than 5 minutes to go in the clutch. Those are technically clutch time minutes for Ariel Hukporti. And, credit to him, he did have a pretty impactful game yesterday. He had that mean posterizer dunk that, for whatever reason, got erased with an offensive foul. I'm still sick about that, because that kind of took away any momentum we could have had. But that's besides the point. This isn't about Hukporti. This is about Towns. I'm expecting a lot more from Towns, obviously, and I do think that will come. I do think the high level scoring that we've seen from him year in and year out will come at some point. I wasn't expecting it to be something that was going to show up in game 1. No, I was hoping by now we were going to see a little bit more of that, and I thought we were going to after the Indiana game because he had 21 points and 15 boards in the game against the Pacers. It looked like he was starting to kind of get himself molded in a little bit. But then last night against Cleveland, you kind of just didn't really notice him out there. I mean, I'm just being honest. You didn't really notice him. Josh Hart had more rebounds than Towns for crying out loud. And, that's not like discrediting Towns. He on paper had a solid game, but it's not to Karl Anthony Towns' standards. And I think everybody knows that. We expect this guy to be taking more than 8 shots in a game. I saw a stat, too, on Twitter this morning. I think it was Tommy Beard that had posted it. Cameron Payne actually has more shot attempts right now so far than Karl Anthony Towns. That's not ideal at all whatsoever. It is not. And, I know Cameron Payne is a very, score-first guard. He comes off the bench. He plays a decent amount of minutes just given the lack of depth we have. So I understand it from there, but you cannot let your all-star big man take less shots than the 7th guy off the bench. You just can't let that happen. And I'm not blaming Towns, and I'm not blaming coaches, or anything like that. I think Thibodeau is going to be able to figure these guys out and get them going. I mean, we're pretty used to slow starts from these Knicks teams. Even the ones from the past 2 seasons that have been in the postseason got off to slow starts, and last season they were floating around 500 before the Anunoby trade. So I'm expecting at some point everything to click, and especially Towns to really get going in the offense. But it's clear to me that they're still building chemistry. I thought maybe the Pacers game, we thought maybe that they finally are getting that chemistry. It looked like they kind of had it a little bit. They had 4 guys with 20 points, all 5 starters in double figures. And last night, it was similar in terms of the scoring share. But I do think we want to see the big games from Jalen Brunson. We want to see the big games from Karl-Anthony Towns because that's what you have him on the floor for. And that's why we traded away Julius Randle for Towns, because we think that he's a better fit alongside Brunson and the other guys than Julius Randle may have been. And that's not exactly discrediting Randle. It's just a term of on-court fit. And I do think on paper, the on-court fit is obviously there with Towns. You have a 7-footer that can shoot threes. How much? Any team would die to have that, especially at the hyper efficient rate that Towns hits him at. Anybody would kill for that. But I think we're just missing some of that right now. And yes, it's early. It's 3 games, and maybe to some this will come off like a big overreaction. And I get it. It is a little reactionary in a way. I won't deny that, but I do think it's an important talking point because we don't want this to become a consistent thing. I know I mentioned in the last video that I did that if the guys can score 20 points each, like all 5 starters can score 20 points, yeah, that's a good thing. It is because you're getting everybody involved, you're maximizing each of their value as much as you can while getting some impact out of everybody. But you still want to have the big games from Towns and Brunson and guys like that. You still want to see that because we know they're capable of it, and we want to see them prove that because quite frankly, not every single night all 5 starters are going to be able to score 20 points. Not every night all 5 starters are going to be shooting above 50% from the floor and all this stuff. So I think that's really the bottom line with that. But the next thing I want to segue into is the 3 points, the 3-point shooting, as it kind of, alludes back to Towns. This isn't strictly a Towns problem. This is a team problem. They are averaging the least amount of 3-point attempts per game at the moment, with only 28.9 per game, and they averaged 41 shots from outside the arc during the preseason. Now, I expect them to take more threes as time goes on and they build chemistry, but I think it's clear that the reason they are 1-2 right now to start the year is because they're not taking enough threes. They're shooting the ball very well efficiently. They're shooting, I think, the second highest field goal percentage in the league so far through the first 3 games. They're above 50%. They are 37% from 3, so it's not like they're inefficient. That's not the issue. It's the volume. We want to see more threes from these guys. And, I know the old school people might be like, oh, you don't want to live and die by the 3. Yeah, I get that. But in today's NBA, you have to be a good shooting team. You have to. Nowadays, any team can come out on the floor and just kill you with threes. I think we saw that pretty evidently in the Boston game where they shot an NBA record, 29 threes, or a tying NBA record. So you have to be a good shooting team. So what I want to ask you, Davin, is, I personally think that the solution to the 3-point issue starts with Towns. But what do you think about that? Where do you think it starts?
No, you're definitely onto something. Towns has only shot 6 threes this season. Through 3 games, Karl Towns has only shot 6 threes. That's not what we got him here for. That's not what his job's supposed to be. And we understand the volume is really what it's all about. I believe, like preseason, you said 41 3 points attempted, per game in the preseason. That's what we expected. We anticipated that coming into the season. We didn't think this would be a problem. So it's kind of throwing everyone for a loop here because what did you get Towns for if he's only taking 28 total shots in 3 games and 6 threes? That's not what you called him here for. So it's like everyone's going to be up to bat more when I think he gets in his rhythm a little more. I also think Mikal Bridges, he's been excellent in his role here. So it's like as these guys get into their roles a little more, get more cemented, they're going to get their open shots. The corner 3 is going to start falling from Mikal Bridges. It already is falling per se, but it's going to be falling even more at a higher rate. Same clip with Karl-Anthony Towns here. That's really what it's all about. Josh Hart also, I don't think he'll be taking as many shots as he's been taking. Josh Hart's currently averaging 16 points per game. We saw him get a little banged up last night against Cleveland, so I don't anticipate him having just a crazy offensive load going forward. He actually shouldn't have an offensive load much of at all. But the fact that he's found his rhythm here early in the season is a good sign. He can set the bar where it is and kind of just keep it around there. I think he wants to keep it around that 10 to 12 points per game region because he takes a shot. When he gets a shot, he's taking it. So I would appreciate that from Josh Hart. But these guys at a higher rate of shooting threes is what it's all about. And there's no nights off. So it's really what you said. Like, you're going to lose games just not shooting enough. Not even the fact that you're converting how much at a high percentage. If you're not shooting enough, you're not going to win games. And over the next, I've seen their schedule in November. It's harsh. It's not it is a harsh schedule in November. They have Miami Heat coming up soon, and after that, a 15-game slate you have in November. I believe you can't call it a night off. There's not a single you could even say this is a game we could probably see the bench get productive. No, everyone's going to be up every night because these teams we've seen teams. I think they have Washington early in November, and that could be the only game you can see in the whole entire calendar month where these guys can say, "Oh, that's a weaker team they have to play." But Washington right now, they just gave a work on Boston. They almost took them to the overtime. So it's like, let's be real here. You guys need to be taking shots and making shots. So yeah, it starts with Karl Anthony Towns. That is a great place to start it. Like I said, getting him more involved, getting him off ball screens, getting this guy set up in the ways that he's used to, instead of trying to have him, work around, Jalen Brunson. These guys have to work together. And I do like the Jalen Brunson. Yeah, you're the leader, you're the captain, as we know. But at the same time, these guys have to save the day as well. We need someone else to put a cape on sometimes. And I'm very big on what I saw yesterday. So we had a lead in the third quarter. Things were looking all right. All of a sudden, it just rained. Everything was just going wrong in the closing quarter and how everything played out. Mikal Bridges only getting one shot in that quarter. Unbelievable. That is not what's supposed to happen after going 9 for 14. And he's been looking great. We saw the magnitude of how they exploded about everything with Mikal, after the first half. But since that first half, he's shooting over 60% from the field, over 38% from three right now. And Mikal Bridges is looking all right now. So it's like, I would love him to be getting more shots up. He's in a perfect range right now. I think he's averaging around 18 points per game. That's kind of where you want to keep him. But at the same time, when he's on, you got to keep him going. You got to keep him going because last night was his night, in my opinion. And if things would have just played a little bit more to his liking, I think the result may have been different. But, these guys are still learning each other. They're kind of learning their flow, the ebbs and flows of everything. So when they get more shots up, everything's going to be good to go.
Right, and something I do want to point out too is that the Knicks have played two very good defenses so far through these first three games. Indiana was the only team that really isn't that good defensively. Boston is obviously one of the best teams defensively in the NBA, and you could argue Cleveland is even the best defensive team in the NBA. So, it's a tough matchup. It's a tough draw for a team that is still trying to work out some chemistry. So, I understand it from that point. I understand that maybe that stifling defense is just tough to get clean looks. I get it. But again, these are all-star players that we're talking about here. We're not talking about, a bunch of role players. We're talking about Karl Anthony Towns, a guy who's a 4-time All-Star, 2-time All-NBA. This is a guy who has been everywhere, and he was just in the conference finals last season. So we know at this point what to expect out of him. And I'm not saying that it's not going to come. I'm fully expecting that at some point we're going to be seeing, some really big games from Karl Anthony Towns. He's a very good player, and he's a smart player. I fully trust him. He works hard. I know there's that, notion that he's kind of soft and all this, but he's a hard worker, and he also can play physical when you really need him to. He hit a nice tough hook shot on Evan Mobley yesterday, which I feel like a lot of people kind of just glossed over, but he's capable of being a very well-rounded big, and I'm okay with him being, impactful inside the arc, but we have him for the shooting. I think we all know that. We traded for him because he's a lights-out shooter. And sure, you could argue that the Knicks didn't necessarily need more shooters. Yeah, that's a fair argument. But when you have the opportunity to grab a 7-foot center who can shoot 40% from three, you take that. You take that because there are not many 7-footers that can do that. And back to what I was saying before, I do think that the 3-point issue right now that the Knicks are having, it starts with Towns. It really does because, Jalen Brunson, good 3-point shooter, but we know that's not his strength. Mikal Bridges is obviously a good 3-point shooter. It's one of his strengths, but we also know he's, lately become a more diverse player in terms of that he's looking to create in other areas other than just shooting. Josh Hart, we know he's not exactly a willing scorer. I know he's averaging 16 points per game right now, and he's looking aggressive taking shots, but we know deep down the long haul he is not an aggressive shot taker. And OG Anunoby, we know offensively he is a catch-and-shoot specialist, right? So you have some really good shooters out there, but you also have guys that, that's not their main thing. OG Anunoby, it's like his main thing, but with Towns, I think we can agree that 3-point shooting is his main thing. We know that that's like his thing. That's what makes him as good of a player as he is. Yes, he's good inside as well. He's an underrated passer, good rebounder, all this stuff. But I think we can agree that what makes Karl Anthony Towns is the 3-ball. So if he starts hitting more threes, if they're looking to get him more touches outside the arc, that could be huge for the Knicks because it can help, gravitate those tough defensive centers on other teams away from the paint to allow Jalen Brunson to work inside and get cleaner looks in the paint. Because yesterday, against Cleveland, they were forcing a lot at the rim yesterday. They were forcing a lot, especially in the fourth quarter. A lot of tough shots were being forced underneath the basket, and you just simply cannot do that when Cleveland has the twin towers of Jared Allen and Evan Mobley down there. You can't do it. Those are two very elite defensive centers. The only way that you can get at least one of those guys out of the paint is by getting Karl Anthony Towns to shoot the ball. That's the only way you can do it, because you simply can't put another body on Towns because they're not big enough to match up. So Towns will shoot right over them. You have to put a center on Towns, obviously. So therefore you got to get him away from the paint. Get him out of there. If you get him out of there, it gets more room for Brunson to operate and Anunoby to get into the paint, because we know he's very strong and can get his way in there too. And of course Mikal Bridges too, who's also an underrated finisher. It doesn't just go along with, of course, like, oh, we want to see them shoot more threes. Yeah, we want to see them shoot more threes and, make these threes. But when Towns can actually shoot like that and you get him going outside the arc, that opens up the floor for everybody else. It really can transform the offense significantly, and that's why I firmly still believe the Knicks can be the number one offense this year. Yes, I know to start the year it's not been like the, I guess, per se number one offense. They've been a good offense, but number one may be a stretch so far for what we're seeing. But we know when they're all playing at their highest level, when this team's at its ceiling, they can be that good of an offense to where they're averaging nearly 120 points a night. I'm serious. They can really do that. When they have every single player clicking, they got all their pieces going together, they got Towns shooting the ball well from outside. This is a 120 point per game offense. It is. And that's really what we need. We need to see Towns shoot the ball more. That's all I really want. I think Towns is a great player, and I think what he's done so far is fine. I don't necessarily think he's been playing bad, but I say the term disappearing act because we want him shooting threes. That's why we have him out there, and he's just not taking shots. He's not taking shots. Eight shots in a game against Cleveland when you're playing nearly 35 minutes, it's unacceptable. I'm sorry, it is. It's not. I can't take that. And, I looked at the numbers as well earlier, and he hasn't even taken more than 11 shots in either of the 3 games. I can't deal with that. I understand you have Brunson out there and you want to get him the most shots. I understand. You want to get Brunson close to, 13, 14, 15, maybe even close to 20 shots a night. I understand. You want your best player getting the most touches and the most shots. But you got to get Towns involved too. You can't have Towns sitting out there doing nothing. You can't have him not involved in the offense for all the reasons that I just laid out. I want to give you a chance though to put some input on that before we wrap the episode up. So go for it.
No, but no, very well said. I was really just saying, like you just said, get Towns involved. It's really just all about playmaking, in my opinion. These guys are still gelling. 3 games in, sure, we all know the history of them all with each other, but at the same time, they don't have the chemistry. It's clear as day. And when we finally see the playmaking fall into place for Towns, then everything else is going to fall into line. I really do believe that. I do know that Jalen Brunson, it's a hard load or a lot to carry for him right now. That's one thing we're going to be seeing from him. It's going to be a growth in his game. It really is. Because playmaking, he had 7 assists yesterday, 1 turnover. It's kind of just he abandoned that a little bit in the fourth quarter. And you want things to kind of just keep going that way. If your shot's not falling, if you're 5 for 15, just keep being a playmaker, man. You don't necessarily have to save the day, and that's okay. Towns sets something up for this guy to get some great looks, and we'll just keep kind of rolling from there, because it was like a disappearing act in the fourth quarter there, and that's not really his whole fault. It was just a matter of circumstances and how the playmaking really just didn't fall his way, and that's kind of how it went. But yeah, everything else you said, yeah, spot on, man, spot on.
Yeah, I mean, like, I hate using the term disappearing act because it has such a negative connotation to it, and when I say when I say it, I think too, like, it brings back a lot of like known players that drop in big situations, such as like Embiid in the playoffs or Julius Randle in the playoffs. But I'm not saying that like Towns has been a zero, because he hasn't been a zero. He has been impactful on the boards. He's been impactful inside the arc. He's even been impactful defensively too. And this is a guy who's not known to be impactful defensively, but he has been. So, he has been doing a lot of the right things, but I just want to see more offensive aggression. I think that's really all I'm asking for at this point. And yes, it's 3 games. I know a lot of people in the comments are probably going to say, oh, it's only 3 games, I'm not worried. Yeah, I'm not worried about it either. I should make that clear. Like, I'm not worried about it. I think at some point very soon we're going to be seeing Towns taking a lot more shots. Matter of fact, maybe even the next game they play tomorrow night against Miami, we see Towns taking close to 15 shots, and I will be happy with that. But again, it's another tough matchup for him because Miami has Bam Adebayo at center. That is another tough matchup for Towns. And I'm not saying that Towns can't overpower that, because if you are an all-star player, you should be able to handle that kind of matchup, and I am fully confident that he can handle it. But of course, I have to acknowledge that you got to tip your cap to some of the good defensive players out there. Cleveland has 2 great defensive centers. Miami has a great defensive center. So who knows what happens, right? who knows how many shots Towns is going to be able to even get, what the opportunities look like. But I think your point about playmaking was great. You got to see the playmaking really fall through, really, piece together very well. I think at some point that will also work out because, we do have additional playmakers on the floor. Like, yes, you're missing some of it with Randall gone, but Mikal Bridges is an underrated playmaker too. This guy can play make. We just watched him be the number one option on the Brooklyn Nets, and sure, they didn't have a lot of success last season, but we know he's a capable playmaker. We know he's capable of being a solid facilitator. Obviously, his main thing is scoring and defense. It's not, playmaking is not his main forte, but either way, he's capable of being a good playmaker. So I'm fully confident that the ball will start moving very well and stuff. I know some people have been calling Jalen Brunson a ball hog, which I don't know why we're doing that already 3 games in. I mean, he's not a ball hog, 1, but 2, why are we doing that already? We can't be turning on him like that. It's obvious that they simply just don't have the chemistry yet. They're all trying to figure out their roles on the court. So it'll come with time. It will. I just want to see Towns do more. That's really all, and I think every fan will agree with me on that. We want to see a little bit more from him. Not necessarily saying he's been playing bad, because I think he's been playing just fine. I just want to see some more, especially shooting. That is really all I got to say. So I do think this is a good place to wrap up the episode. So guys, really hope you enjoyed this video. Let us know what you think about Karl-Anthony Towns as well as the entire offense in the comment section below, because we would love to hear about it and have discussions with you guys on this topic, because I do think it's a pretty hard-hitting subject right now in Knicks world. And also, you can follow us on all of our social media platforms. We are on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, of course this YouTube page that you are watching the video on. You can follow our personal Twitter accounts. They're above our heads. And we will see you guys in the next episode of Fireside Knicks. Peace out.